I remember my parents not being able to have a conversation on the phone. My mom would often say, "This is not a phone conversation. I'll tell you in person." The walls had ears.
Building WhatsApp on his ideals, Jan Koon believed in the deal he was signing 100%. Meta promised he could be ad-free for at least 5 years, but they didn't even wait that long. Losing his co-founder and best friend and ultimately leaving his ideals behind. How did a poor kid from the Soviet Union invent WhatsApp, and what became of it? Well, before any of the compromises, 21-year-old Jan was just trying to find his purpose in life. Sitting in a classroom at San Jose State University, Jan hated school, but he didn't know what else to do with his life. Yahoo co-founder David Philo calls on his mobile. Their server breaks down. He needs Jan to come in and fix it.
Jan was at San Jose State in a computer science class, and Philo called him and said, "Where the are you?" And Jan said, "Well, I'm in class." And David said, "Get your ass in here."
Liking his job more than school, he drops out.
I was trying to do both. I was trying to go to school part-time and work full-time, and that only lasted for about 2 weeks, and I was like, well, shit, I really love working at Yahoo.
But Yahoo's focus on making money by showing ads leaves him disillusioned, forcing Jan along with his friend Brian Acton to quit in 2007. He decides to take a year off to travel, going to South America and playing ultimate frisbee. As both of his parents passed away, Jan was unhappy and alone, living off $400,000 saved up from work. January 2009, he's about to make a discovery. Jan buys an iPhone and browsing through the App Store, he has a realization. The App Store was about to make apps popular. He thinks it would be cool to have statuses next to people's names. It was a wild idea. To him, no one's done it before. But he wants to build something people would like and something he believes in. Choosing the name WhatsApp because it sounds like what's up, he creates the company on his birthday, February 24th, 2009. For the next several weeks, he codes everything himself, spending his days and nights connecting all the international dialing numbers and accounting for the hundreds of regional differences. It was all he thought about. The only thing that mattered was no storing of data, being ad-free, and delivering a smooth experience. But like all things, it wasn't easy. The first release of the app would crash or get stuck. Writing down the numerous problems and bugs his friends told him about, he slowly fixed them himself. Jan almost gave up and started looking for a job, but Brian, believing in Jan, encourages him to keep trying just for a few more months. And just in time, Apple started push notifications, with each status update being pushed on to all the other contacts connected to them. Jan watched on his computer as people notified each other with funny statuses like, "I woke up late," and then seeing someone else reply to it. He realized he created a messaging app. Soon people started sending him email, excited to get free international texting to friends across the world. Not only that, WhatsApp only used a phone number to log in because Jan hated usernames and passwords.
2009, can we do something better? Can we get rid of usernames and passwords and all that stuff and buddy lists and just simplify it?
In one summer, he lost 3 Skype accounts because he forgot his login details.
Every one of those products had problems. Like with SMS, you could send a message, you don't know if they got it or not. With Skype, you had to have this username exchange that was kind of complicated. I actually lost my Skype account and I had to create a new one and to add all my friends again. It was a pain.
What's more, MMS messages charged per text and were unreliable for sending pictures. In reality, they were the cash cows of carriers. Other alternatives, like Google's Gtalk or Skype, were only on desktop. Only BlackBerry was free to text, but it only worked with other BlackBerries. Now the challenge was to keep the app working while growing bigger, before users jumped to the next new thing. September 2009, they released a messaging component with WhatsApp 2.0 that saw users increase to 250,000. But with signups growing too fast, it put pressure on his servers and budget. Needing help, he went to see Brian. At his kitchen table, they messaged each other on WhatsApp. Brian realized it was a better texting experience than anything before it. With Brian joining him, they now worked on the second floor of the Red Rock Cafe. With Jan writing code, Brian worked on plans to generate revenue. When the app was free, they had 10,000 downloads a day, costing 10,000 verification texts daily. Switching to 99 cents, it went down to 1,000 downloads a day, making it more manageable. However, why didn't they just get advertising or sell user data to get budget to expand? Which was basically making a compromise on one of the only three things that mattered. To get the answer, we have to look back towards the Soviet Union. Born in Kyiv, Ukraine, Jan grew up in a town called Fastiv. As a rebellious kid, he learned harsh lessons. Since the country was part of the Soviet Union, their house had no hot water, and without an indoor washroom at school, he and other kids had to walk outside in the freezing winter to go to the washroom. But the worst part was the spying.
The government has the ability to get people to be informants.
Informants were everywhere, and the KGB listened in on phone calls.
I actually grew up in communist Russia, and we had this environment which was where the government just kind of knows like everything about you.
Jan learned to stay quiet while he saw people get arrested for telling stories about political leaders.
I remember my parents not being able to have a conversation on the phone. My mom would often say, "This is not a phone conversation, I'll tell you in person." The walls had ears and you couldn't speak freely.
The fear of being spied on and getting exiled for having the wrong political views always loomed over them.
The Soviet Union, as we have known it for most of the 20th century, is breaking up now.
The future now looks grim for the citizens of the former Soviet Union. Prices for food and energy in Russia will go up several 100% next week. There's a prospect of mass unemployment. In a way, the country is back to 1917.
After the Soviet Union fell, political and economic turmoil forced him and his family to move to California, leaving his dad behind because he got sick. They lived in government housing and collected food stamps to eat. Jan worked as a janitor in supermarkets, and his mom worked as a babysitter to make ends meet. But after his mom got cancer, they lived on her disability checks. And not being able to call home, his dad died before he got to see him again.
Trying to keep in touch with my friends and family was not that easy. You had all these like long distance telephone companies, you had to sign up for a plan, and just communicating and staying in touch in 1992 was so difficult and so painful. And when you're an immigrant and you don't really have a lot of financial resources to do it, it gets even more challenging.
The experience of being spied on made him passionate about privacy, and he didn't believe that showing ads would make it a better experience. But now that WhatsApp was working, how was he going to balance growing the business without compromising his values? To get money for operations, Brian pulled together 5 ex-Yahoo friends to invest $250,000. It stabilized the company for now, and it made Brian co-founder. But the biggest strain on their bank account was sending verification texts, and they didn't want to take venture capital funding, preferring to remain independent. Hiring new employees, they moved into an office inside a converted warehouse. Saving money, they used blankets for warmth and worked on cheap IKEA tables. Early 2010, about a year after starting the company, they started to make $5,000 a month to help cover costs. They still refused to talk to investors no matter how hard they pushed, but Sequoia partner Jim Goetz finally gets a meeting after 8 months of working his contacts. Meeting at the Red Rock Cafe, Jan and Brian asked Jim a series of direct questions about his goals and intentions. But Jim answers honestly, saying he only wanted to be a strategic advisor, and he promises not to push advertising on them. It reassures the co-founders they accept $8 million from Sequoia. By the end of 2011, they had 450 million users, with 72% of them on it each day, while the industry average was only 10 to 20%. And ranking in the top 20 of all apps on the App Store, they were going viral while spending nothing on marketing and PR. After getting $8 million and another $50 million in a second round from Sequoia, Jan and Brian just wanted to do their work. But other players were making their moves. April 2012, Meta buys Instagram for $1 billion.
Facebook buying Instagram for the bargain price of $1 billion.
For largest acquisition ever and what could be a turning point for social media overall. Facebook buying photo sharing company Instagram for $1 billion.
Mark Zuckerberg was looking for new ways to grow his social media empire. As WhatsApp's growth exceeded Facebook's growth in their third year, and as the app moved into social networking products like chat and photos, he recognized it was a threat. Within weeks of the Instagram acquisition, Mark sends an email to Jan, inviting him to dinner. Jan evades, saying he had server issues to fix and was soon going on travel. But not taking no for an answer, Mark asked to meet before he left. You see, Meta needed WhatsApp because not only was it competing with Facebook Messenger, but it was huge in countries where Messenger was weak, like Brazil, Indonesia, and South Africa. And while WhatsApp was slowly taking people away from Messenger, buying the company meant buying their users and future users.
So WhatsApp is taking a big chunk of people who should have been using Facebook, and they're all using Facebook first. A lot of them were using Facebook first. And they've been looking at Facebook Messenger and looking at the numbers for that for the last year to 2 years. And clearly that hasn't stopped WhatsApp from growing.
Lastly, it would give Meta huge amounts of personal data on millions of people to better target ads and services, which is exactly how Meta makes money. Forwarding Mark's reply to Brian and Jim, Brian suggests that Jan meet to find out more. Later that month, they have lunch together on the back patio of Esther's German bakery. And although Mark hinted at combining their companies and admired what Jan had built, they didn't come to any agreements. Instead, they stayed in touch and became friends, meeting once a month for dinner. But the long game was already being played. In an internal company memo, Mark told the board of directors that they needed an M&A to build a moat around Meta on mobile and ads. June 2013. By coincidence, Jan and Brian met Sundar Pichai, who oversees Android and Chrome at Google. Being like-minded, they bond over their love of clean and simple products. Around early 2014, Sundar suggests a meeting with Larry Page, CEO of Google, set for Tuesday, February 11th, 2014. Google was interested in WhatsApp too, after they failed to grow their own social media platform, Google+. Combining their massive resources, it could create a social network bigger than Meta. At the same time, SMS verification was costing WhatsApp $500,000 a month, $6 million a year, draining their bank account. It was a win-win deal. But 3 days earlier, on Friday, February 7th, a WhatsApp employee runs into Aman Zufunan, Meta's head of business development. In a conversation, they tell Aman that Jan is going to meet with Larry on Tuesday. Sensing their deal in danger, Aman runs back to the company and speeds up the acquisition offer they had been planning. Meta couldn't allow anyone else to acquire WhatsApp. Monday, February 10th, the day before the Google meeting, Mark Zuckerberg invites Jan to his house in the evening. Getting in front of Google, he makes his intentions known, talking directly about buying WhatsApp, and offers a board member seat in the company. Jan remembers it was a partnership where I would help him make decisions about the company, and Mark promises not to interfere with their company's operations. Jan is intrigued. The next day, Tuesday, February 11th, Jan and Brian meet with Larry and Sundar in Google's headquarters. For 1 hour, they talk in a conference room about the mobile industry and WhatsApp's goals. Allegedly, Larry is interested in buying. At the same time as the meeting, the people at Meta and WhatsApp are calculating the asking price for a potential deal. Thursday, February 13th at 7 p.m., Jan and Brian drive to Mark's house for dinner. Mark tells them he wants them to keep doing what they're doing, but with the support of Meta's legal, financial, and engineering resources. They start negotiating on a price. Mark offers $15 billion. Jan said he wanted closer to $20 billion. Mark says he needs to think about it. The day after, Friday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, Mark and Jan have dinner after work to discuss the last details. Not agreeing on terms, they take the night to think about it. The following day, Saturday, February 15th, in the evening, Jan drives to Mark's house to negotiate again. They finally agree on terms with an offer of $19 billion for WhatsApp. Believing Mark's promise that they'll be left independent, Jan calls Brian to confirm. Brian, thinking they can work together and believing Mark's a good guy, gives his approval. With Brian's agreement, Jan and Mark shake hands and celebrate. They hug, and Mark opens a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue Label. Jan is excited to do great things together. Next Wednesday, February 19th, the morning they sign the deal papers, Jan, Brian, and Mark drive to the North County Social Services office. On the door, where Jan used to collect food stamps as a teenager, he signs the deal, getting $19 billion in cash, $76.5 million in Facebook shares, and owning 45% of WhatsApp. Jan walks away with $6.8 billion. He was once collecting welfare, and now he's worth billions. But here's where it gets bad. Before the deal could be completed, Meta needed the European Commission's approval to buy WhatsApp. The Commission investigates to see if it violates EU competition rules, giving them an undue advantage. At one point, they ask if they can automatically match the data of users of both companies, thereby expanding Meta's database for marketing and other purposes. Knowing the technology to match users already existed, but denying anyway, Meta violates competition rules. March 2014, Jan wrote publicly saying, "Respect for your privacy is coded into our DNA, and we build WhatsApp around the goal of knowing as little about you as possible." Yet, only 2 years later, in 2016, WhatsApp starts linking users' phone numbers with Meta users' identities. According to Brian, it seemed they were hoping the Commission forgot about the investigation. In 2017, the Commission discovers the user matching and fines Meta 110 million euros for giving misleading information to acquire WhatsApp. According to a source that was part of the deal discussions, there was no pressure to monetize in the 5 years after the deal. But now they had to make WhatsApp worth the $19 billion. Growing impatient with the company's no advertising position, and with pressure to show a growth in revenue to Wall Street, Mark and other executives start pressuring the co-founders to monetize and share more data. Expectations were high for WhatsApp to be as successful with monetization as Instagram. At first, Jan and Brian resisted. Ads were the complete opposite of their vision. They were promised it would be ad-free and they wouldn't have to compromise on their principles. But in one of their meetings, Mark told Brian that WhatsApp was a product group to him like Instagram. And not wanting to wait any longer, Meta came up with plans for targeted ads. They included tools for businesses to chat with users. In 2017, due to the constant pressure to monetize, Brian left, leaving $850 million in unvested stock. According to Brian, Meta's lawyers refused to pay out the unvested stock, reasoning it wasn't a breach in contract since they were only looking into it and hadn't implemented it. To add insult to injury, in that meeting, Mark allegedly said to Brian, "This is probably the last time you'll ever talk to me." Feeling guilty about the deal, he posted, "It is time, #delete Facebook," and an apology. Afterwards, he invested in Signal to recreate WhatsApp in the ideal way he visualized it. 8 months later, Jan left Meta, although not in the same way as Brian. He seemed to accept the outcome of the company he created and decided to spend time working on his cars and playing Ultimate Frisbee, preferring to focus his mind and time on other things that make him happy. Nowadays, Jan spends his time donating his money to hospitals and schools, managing his portfolio of stocks, and investing in startups. It seems that ultimately, WhatsApp's stance on privacy wasn't compatible with Meta's stance on targeted advertising, as they were the complete opposite of each other. However, the other way of looking at it is, while targeted marketing can be useful to suggest practical things to individual people, it can also be taken too far by collecting too much data for other purposes, and therefore, it must be balanced. What are your thoughts? Do you think Jan and Brian would have succeeded if they partnered with another company? I'd love to read your comments below. Take care and see you in the next one.